I'm a witch. What? My friends and I, she saw his expression and immediately added, nobody you know. We're into witchcraft. When I saw those witches burning, I felt like I was burning too, like I was on fire. But that isn't real, it's a movie. Jack's observation did little to comfort her, but she did not freak out again. She couldn't watch the rest of the film. Her inner tumult subsided and she clung to him, half asleep in his arms through the remainder. He didn't see that much of Janelle until about 9 months later. She came to stay with him for a couple of weeks at a house where he was temporarily living in Torrance, right at the start of his second year in college. Ironically, she and one of his roommates, a brainy guy from Texas who played electric guitar, fell in love, ran away together, had a baby, and after doing too much strychnine-laced acid, became fanatical Jehovah's Witnesses. The crazy stuff that happened with Sherry had made him think about Janelle. To understand what happened to Sherry and Janelle, one had to understand the fucked up, dysfunctional subculture of a lot of Riverside teenagers back then. Many male role models, both young men and teenage boys in the Inland Empire, were not nice guys. For every one guy like Jack or Russ or Jack's other friend Chip, there were 10 other guys who were cruel bikers, ruthless drug dealers, treacherous addicts, racist jocks, or self-obsessed, egocentric musicians. Many of them regarded women as things, objects to be dominated and discarded when done. Both Marshall Dixon and Danny Scovilli were from large, poor families transplanted from East Texas. They both lived on the west side. When they bothered to show up to school at all, it was to Rubidoo High. Jack considered them to be white trash, and as he was soon to find out, some of the worst of the worst. They wore their hair long like him, but they weren't peace and love hippies or idealists or quote, socially engaged for change, unquote, individuals. They were petty criminals, probably sociopaths, who burglarized, dealt drugs, and enjoyed beating people up whenever the spirit moved them. Their one redeeming quality was that they were both pretty decent guitar players. Occasionally, they liked to rent a generator, get their amps and some people together, and go set up late at night out in the brush-choked wilderness of Pedley, a rural West Riverside suburb. They would rig a huge, thick sheet of plywood as a makeshift stage. They then would play loud as fuck, getting wrecked on weed, wine, whiskey, beer, and pills to the wee hours. The cops never showed up. Jack was at a couple of these parties, and because he knew something about amps and PAs, he sometimes helped with the cables, wiring, and sound setup. Maybe a year and a half before that, around the time he first got his driver's license, he had known Marshall slightly. Several days running, they had double-dated a couple of pill-popping French-Canadian sisters named Millicent and Mandy. Jack really didn't have any reason to feel one way or another about Marshall and Davy. He didn't like them, he didn't trust them, but he didn't hate them. Not until after he heard Billy Miller's story. Jack ran into Billy one night just before Christmas vacation break was over. It was down at the 3rd Street Mall in the first week of January 1971, a couple of weeks before Jack's 18th birthday. He hadn't seen Billy since the night Billy had been with Sherry at the Jack in the Box. "How's Sherry?" He gave Jack a weird look. "I saw you with her at the Jack in the Box 2 or 3 weeks ago." He smiled nervously. "Oh, yeah, I didn't see you, I guess." "She okay?" "Uh-huh, yeah, I guess so." "Well, what does that mean?" "Nothing." You don't seem sure. You haven't seen her lately?" No, I've seen her. We've been going out." "Well, what's the matter?" Billy hemmed and hawed, not sure if he should tell Jack. "You didn't hear what happened, did you?" "What do you mean? To Sherry?" "Yeah." "When?" It must have been a few days after that night at Jack in the Box." "I haven't heard anything. I haven't talked to her." Billy kept looking away from Jack. "Will you stop beating around the fucking bush and tell me?" "I guess it's okay to tell you. I know she likes you and you guys were kind of tight." Jack frowned. "You know, as friends." Jack just stared at him, dreading the unknown secret he was about to divulge. Billy gulped. She and I went out with Davy and Marshall to the orange groves one afternoon, out where no one was around, maybe a half mile from her house. There was this other guy with us too, a friend of theirs. I'm trying to remember his name. He's in jail now, up at Wayside. Billy's eyes were getting a little wet. Anyway, when we got there, Marshall broke out the weed and we toked up. Man, it was strong shit. Gold or something. Something stronger. So Davy and Marshall say, we're going to go pick us some oranges. Right then, this guy, hey, you know what? I think his name was Daryl. Yeah, now I remember. His name was Daryl. He fires up another joint and passes it to me right off the bat. Same time, Davy reaches out to Sherry, who's in the front with him and Marshall, and says, come on. Me, I'm in the back with Daryl. Before I knew it, she was giggling and going with him. I took another drag, and Daryl looked at me and goes, suckers, more for us. I handed the joint back to him. I noticed Davy and Marshall and Sherry had gone out of sight. I made a move to get out, and suddenly I felt Daryl's hand clamp around my wrist like a vice. Billy was sweating, not relishing telling the tale. He took a deep breath. I knew then for sure something was up. Daryl goes, you stay here. You don't want to bother those three. My imagination started going crazy and picturing all kinds of things happening. I can't believe Sherry didn't have enough sense to stay in the goddamn car. Jack's face was as white as a sheet. He sat down on a bird-shit-encrusted mall bench, and Billy plopped down beside him. Billy gently placed his hand on Jack's arm. You okay? You look kind of sick. Jack didn't answer. I guess it is the kind of thing makes a decent person feel sick. I still feel sick. I got sick to my stomach having to sit in the car with that goon. He looked like a fucking caveman. Had a tattoo right here. Billy pointed to the V-shaped web of skin between his left thumb and forefinger. It said, fuck it. And there was a tattoo of a harpooned whale right next to it. Jack found his voice. How long did they have her out there? I don't know. It seemed like maybe, half an hour? It seemed like more than that, but I think we got there around 4, and the clock on the dashboard said it was 4:30 when Davy and Marshall came back. The assholes were done. I flashed on all kinds of horrible things, like maybe they even killed her. The pricks, they were laughing really stoned. They couldn't get their pants zipped up all the way. Then Daryl reached across me and shoved open the door and kicked me out into the dirt. There was a cloud of dust when I looked after them, the car racing down the road. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I walked maybe 10 minutes before I found her. She still had her jeans down around her ankles. She was crying, but, silently. There was no sound coming out of her. She had blood between her legs. How could those bastards have done that? Yeah, I know. I known those guys since I was little. They've always been mean, and I know they did it to some other girls. You knew they did it to others? Yeah. Jack exploded, standing up, towering over Billy. What the fuck were you doing getting into a car with them with Sherry, going out to the orange groves to get stoned? Billy looked meekly up at him, red-faced and stung to the core. He slowly nodded. You're right. I'm an idiot. I just never ever in a million years thought they'd do something like that to Sherry, especially with me around. Why not? I don't know. He stared at his feet, shamed, then looked back up, tears on his cheeks. I guess because, she's so cute. She's so tiny. And I'm not very strong, but they knew she was my girlfriend. They didn't say anything to each other for a couple of minutes. Billy sighed at last and went on. We walked back to Sherry's house. It wasn't that far, but she could barely make it. She was still bleeding. When we got back, her mom took her to the hospital. Sherry wouldn't tell her who did it, and she told me not to tell her mom either. The doctor told Sherry she'd never be able to have kids.